You're listening to an Airwave Media Podcast.
This episode is brought to you by LifeLock. Between two-factor authentication, strong passwords, and a VPN, you try to be in control of how your info is protected. But many other places also have it, and they might not be as careful. That's why LifeLock monitors hundreds of millions of data points a second for threats. If your identity is stolen, they'll fix it, guaranteed, or your money back. Save up to 40% your first year. Visit lifelock.com/podcast for 40% off. Terms apply.
This episode is brought to you by Liquid IV. In heart-pumping moments, you need hydration that can keep up. That's where Liquid IV comes in. Scientifically formulated to quickly replenish electrolytes and fluids lost from your well-earned sweat session. Hydrate your favorite mode of movement with Liquid IV, made with triple the electrolytes of the leading sports drink, plus 8 vitamins and nutrients. Also available and sugar-free. Tear, pour, live more. Visit liquidiv.com to learn more.
In 1989, the Mutual UFO Network, or MUFON, a nonprofit volunteer citizen organization dedicated to the study of UFOs, found itself in the midst of a rift. In one camp were the more conservative and traditional UFO researchers, people like astronomer Jacques Vallée, and to some extent the nuclear physicist Stanton Friedman, who would have liked the world to take the scientific study of UAP seriously. In the other camp was John Lear and his coterie of conspiracy theorists, who made unsupported claims about government cover-ups and alien autopsies with no concrete evidence beyond the rumors of leaked documents, all of which, if they ever were leaked, turned out to be forged. That year, when MUFON organized a symposium in Las Vegas, John Lear's home city, where Lear himself was the state director of the organization, again on a volunteer basis, he demanded that he and his cadre of like-minded conspiracists be granted ample opportunity to speak. When MUFON leadership refused, Lear threatened to hold a rival symposium to draw audiences away. MUFON directors eventually gave in, and the theme of the symposium was declared: the UFO cover-up, a government conspiracy? Indeed, testimony of what seemed to be a genuine government conspiracy to spread false information about UFOs was presented at this conference, but it wasn't that presented by Lear and his conspiracists. Rather, it was by well-respected UFO researcher Bill Moore, who dropped the bombshell that he had himself been involved in these government disinformation operations.
In early September 1980, I was approached by a well-placed individual within the intelligence community who claimed to be directly connected to a high-level government project dealing with UFOs. I knew I was being recruited, but at that point, I had no idea for what.
However, rather than evidence of the government covering up UFOs, it appeared to be evidence that the government was encouraging belief in the extraterrestrial origin of UFOs.
It became apparent to me that my supplying information to the government through Doty on the activities of Paul Benowitz, APRO, and to a lesser extent several other individuals was to be a part of this equation. I had nothing whatsoever to do with the counterintelligence and the disinformation, although I either knew or was aware of a number of people directly involved with that end of things. The story that emerged from this melange of fact, fiction, fantasy, hearsay, hard data, and government disinformation was absolutely incredible. To the best of my knowledge, it was all disinformation. And I was the unfortunate one who had unwittingly supplied the fuel to those who were spreading the fire.
The revelation discredited Moore and by extension dealt a huge blow to many of the claims being propagated by Lear and his camp, as much of the mythology they had developed was based on supposed documents Moore had uncovered, and claims made by other UFO researchers that Moore now revealed had been seeded by intelligence operatives.
Now you know the truth. Disinformation is a strange and bizarre game. We certainly have a number of rude people in this audience. That's too bad.
Frankly, I'm a little ashamed. This is not a debate. It is a paper trying to be presented. Now, please show a little courtesy.
One member of Lear's camp, a newcomer to the UFO speaking circuit, made his debut during that symposium, reading rather monotonously from his statement, "The Secret Government, the Origin, Identity, and Purpose of MJ-12. Like some other UFO whistleblowers today who recently testified before Congress, this man, Bill Cooper, claimed to have personally witnessed UAP while in the Navy. And unlike Donald Kehoe and John Lear before him, Bill Cooper claimed to have personally seen classified documents revealing the extraterrestrial secrets kept by the government during his time with the Office of Naval Intelligence. Thus, in his lectures and interviews, and later in his book and shortwave radio program, when he claimed to be revealing personal knowledge that the U.S. government was suppressing information about recovered alien spacecraft and extraterrestrial biological remains, he was very much making the same claims as former Air Force intelligence officer David Grush, who recently testified to essentially the same thing in a public congressional hearing this summer. This is Historical Blindness. I'm Nathaniel Lloyd, and as I look further into the history of American UFO whistleblowers, I am coming to believe what Bill Moore told his audience that day in 1989.
The current crop of disinformation is really nothing new. It's just that a different crop of people are spreading it this time around.
Thank you for joining me for UFO Whistleblowers in American Tradition, Part 2, Bill Cooper. Before we begin the episode, I want to thank my new patrons, George Solovey, Christopher Pohl, and Randy Raymond. Thank you so much to all of my patrons. If you pledge on Patreon, you can get ad-free and exclusive episodes. I promise to release one minisode a month, but for a long time I've been able to release 2, always giving patrons something exclusive between each episode and effectively making this a weekly podcast for patrons. For example, after my episode on techno-fear and Luddism, I released some further thoughts focused on the later 19th century agrarian revolt, the Swing Riots. And after the first part of my series on UFO whistleblowers, I spoke about Ray Palmer, the sci-fi magazine editor who is credited as having invented and promoted the idea of flying saucers in the late 40s. If you hear the term minisode and you think these are just insubstantial little pieces, only a couple minutes long, that's not the case. They're fully produced and researched episodes that typically range from 10 to 15 minutes in length. Patron feeds also get episodes early and, as I said, their episodes aren't interrupted by ads or Patreon pitches like this. So visit patreon.com/historicalblindness and support the show. Or you can support me by making a one-time donation at historicalblindness.com/donate or at the PayPal link in the show notes or on Venmo at Historical Blindness. Now, on with the episode. Welcome to Historical Blindness. The rift in MUFON at the 1989 conference might be said to reflect a wider rift among those who researched UAP and believed in the visitation of extraterrestrials to Earth. There has long been 2 views on this topic, one that may be called the light side and one that has been termed the dark side. To those who keep to the light side of ufology, the extraterrestrials who have supposedly taken an interest in our world and in us are benevolent creatures, come to teach us how to ascend from our current condition and guide us into a new age of enlightenment or prosperity. This is the realm of UFO religions or cults, led by supposed contactees like George Van Tassel, who claimed to be in telepathic contact with an alien intelligence that he described as an ascended master.
When you realize we're dealing with a type of man that is almost as far above us in intelligence as we are above the lower animals, there isn't anything phenomenal in this at all. This thing is very similar to a thing that happened in our biblical records where a Lord presented Moses with a pattern to build a tabernacle. They came out of the sky, they handed him stone tablets, and this phenomena that's taking place today is as old as our history.
Now, of course, this light side of ufology has its own dark side as well, with UFO cults like Heaven's Gate ending in the tragedy of mass suicide.
The dead were all members of a cult called Heaven's Gate. The bodies have been removed. The autopsies are underway. And the families were being notified, even as investigators were removing files and computers. Any kind of evidence they think will help them figure out why 39 people killed themselves here.
But among those who believe, without evidence, that UFOs or UAP really do carry extraterrestrial visitors, the opposing view, of course, is that these visitors are in fact malevolent. And it was John Lear and his camp within MUFON, the Darksiders of ufology, who really popularized the notion of extraterrestrials being malicious. We heard it from John Lear already, who claimed that aliens had deceived the US government, that these aliens mutilated and experimented on not just cattle but people as well. And of the quote-unquote dark side movement in ufology that John Lear spearheaded, no one was darker than his protege, Milton William Cooper, or Bill Cooper, whom Lear introduced to the world. Cooper would take Lear's claims in increasingly darker directions, asserting that extraterrestrials and the shadowy powers complicit in their plans conspired to control the population through the drug trade and by unleashing bioengineered diseases, and of course, through abduction and murder, including arguably the most famous murder in modern history, that of JFK. Over the course of Cooper's career, his changing claims regarding UFOs and the evolution of his conspiracist ideas, we see that he came to view the sinister forces arrayed against humanity as more of a satanic, or as he would say, Luciferian plot. While David Grush has made no such claims, we do see the further development of this dark side movement in claims made by other recent UFO whistleblowers, like the equally dubious statements made by former Pentagon official Lou Elizondo, the whistleblower who served as the principal source for the momentous 2017 New York Times expose of a secret government UAP program. In his many television and podcast interviews since going public, Elizondo has claimed that elements in the government try to suppress UAP research because they believe the phenomenon to be demonic.
This is a person I respected tremendously, very, very senior person. He's told me, he said, Lou, I want you to stop doing this. I said, okay, sir, I certainly can, but may I ask why? And he says, well, we already know what it is. Now, at that moment, I honestly thought maybe it was our own technology. And I said, okay, sir, so it's ours? And he said, no, that's not what I'm saying. And he said, he asked me point blank, have you read your Bible lately? I said, well, sir, I think I know what it says. Where are you going with this? And he said, well, then you would know that these things are demonic and we should not be pursuing them.
Whether Elizondo is making this up or not, it does seem to suggest that some of the claims of darksider ufologists from the 80s and 90s remain influential in people's thinking about UAP today, lending a cultish aspect to Lear's dark side UFO mythology. And while there is some connection between Bill Cooper and these claims that UFOs are actually a demonic plot, there is also direct connection between his claims and numerous other harmful conspiracy movements that have arisen in the last 30 years, many of which remain extremely influential today. Typically in October, I explore some myth or legend that might be considered spooky, and to be sure, some of the false claims that John Lear and Bill Cooper made about aliens are scary. In fact, aliens have been a mainstay of Hollywood horror since the first creature features. But dark side UFO mythology has inspired some of their most frightening treatments, as seen in The X-Files, for example. But what is truly terrifying here is how the skillful deceptions of Bill Cooper, who rose out of the field of ufology to become perhaps the single most influential conspiracy theorist and agent of misinformation in modern time, continue to lead people into darkness today. Milton William Cooper was a military brat. His father was a pilot in the Army Air Corps, and he was raised on a series of air bases, many of them overseas, never staying in one place long enough to put down roots. Because of this, much of what he understood about America and American culture, he learned from those in the military and from the American Forces Radio and Television Service, or AFRTS. The irony here is that later in his career, he would present himself as a champion and defender of a kind of domestic American ideal that he never really experienced himself. And he would become the voice and mascot of many homegrown militia patriot sorts, even though he had always, in a very real sense, felt alienated from his country. As a teen on an air base near Tokyo, he had his first brush with hosting a radio program when he was given an hour to act as disc jockey, playing Elvis, Sam Cooke, Nat King Cole, and big band music. Unsurprisingly, when he came of age, he entered the service himself, joining the Air Force in 1962 and the Navy in 1966, and serving as a patrol boat commander in Vietnam. He saw a lot of action in country, and he lost friends, but he was awarded a Medal of Valor for his efforts, and afterward earned a cushy office job in Hawaii for a while, on the briefing team of Admiral Bernard Clary in the Office of Naval Intelligence, a position for which he said he had to be given a top-secret Q clearance. Bill Cooper would be the first conspiracy figure to make a big deal about having a Q clearance, suggesting that it granted him access to all the most tightly guarded secrets that the sinister U.S. government hid from its citizens. In this regard, as well as others, he can be seen as inspiring, at least in part, the QAnon online conspiracy cult of today. In truth, having a Q clearance in order to work in an office setting in a secure facility is simply not that impressive. I know someone who works in IT at Lawrence Livermore National Laboratory. He has a Q clearance simply because he is around and has access to computers and a network through which classified information may pass. In fact, Q clearance is a Department of Energy access authorization, so it doesn't really make sense that Cooper would have it in the Office of Naval Intelligence, though he may have had some equivalent top-secret clearance. This is just the first sign that he may have been embellishing his role in that office in Hawaii and lying about what secrets he learned there. The other is that over the course of his decade-long career as a conspiracy theorist, whenever some conspiracist claim was made by others, Bill Cooper would afterward confirm it, saying he had seen classified files in a certain filing cabinet at the Office of Naval Intelligence that proved the claim was true.
It was during these briefings that I was able to see an awful lot of information that is suppressed, withheld from the public, considered to be too dangerous. A lot of reasons, most of which are totally illegal. I kept this secret.
In Bill Cooper's version of reality, any office worker with a clearance could browse files about the U.S. government's contact with extraterrestrials, which were kept in what must have been an absolutely stuffed and unsecured filing cabinet. After leaving the Navy, Bill Cooper moved to California, where he married numerous women, struggled to make ends meet in a variety of business ventures, battled with PTSD, and turned to alcohol and spousal abuse. During these years, he would twice get into terrible motorcycle accidents, one of them resulting in the loss of a leg. Years later, once he had commenced his career as a conspiracy theorist, he tried to claim that those accidents had been attempts on his life, that he'd been run off the road by government operatives who visited him in the hospital and threatened his life if he ever spoke about what he'd seen in that filing cabinet in Hawaii.
I left the Navy with an honorable discharge, 1975, December the 11th. Within 4 months, I was trying to tell a member of the press what I knew. Within 3 days of the time that I opened my mouth to him, I was attacked brutally, put into the hospital. Got out of the hospital 3 days later, started to tell someone else, and this time I said, don't call Washington and try to verify anything that I'm telling you. I was attacked again viciously and lost my left leg. In the hospital, 2 very well-dressed, clean-cut men came in, asked me if I was going to shut up and be a good little boy, or if the next time was going to be the final time. I said, guys, I'm going to be the nicest little boy you've ever seen in your life.
His father, though, had a different story to tell, saying those motorcycle accidents were Bill's own fault, and that alcohol may have been involved. In 1981 and 82, he suffered a series of mental breakdowns and was hospitalized for his PTSD. Finally, though, later in the 1980s, he found his calling while browsing the weird postings on electronic bulletin boards accessed through computers on a newfangled network called the Internet. On one particular message board, Paranet, Bill was introduced to the claims of ufologists and conspiracy theorists. In 1988, he finally decided to add his own story, reaching out to the board's systems operator, who introduced him as a genuine military witness. The story Cooper then told was of standing atop a surfaced submarine in 1966 and seeing a massive unidentified aircraft diving into the ocean and then emerging from the waters and jetting back into the clouds.
I was stationed aboard the USS Tyro SS-416. On a transit between the Portland-Seattle area and the Pearl Harbor submarine base, I saw my one and only, genuine, fantastic, flying saucer, UFO, alien spacecraft, American spacecraft, whatever it was, because I really to this day don't know, except that it was as large as an aircraft carrier, literally, a midway class carrier. Came up out of the ocean, tumbled on its own axis, and went up into the clouds. Well, needless to say, my jaw dropped down to my chest.
It wasn't that world-shattering as UFO claims go, just another sighting, embellished with Cooper's further claim that his commanding officer swore all the witnesses to secrecy.
We were told never to discuss it with anyone, not even amongst ourselves. So we had to swear that we would never talk about with anyone or reveal what it was that we didn't see.
Cooper's post was overshadowed when, a few days later, John Lear released his statement, The Lear Hypothesis, right there on Paranet. Perhaps jealous that the attention had shifted from his story to Lear's outlandish claims, but also probably seeing an opportunity, Cooper claimed on Paranet that he could confirm about half of what Lear had written about, as he had seen classified documents in that overflowing file cabinet that corroborated it. Lear made contact with Cooper, and soon Cooper was out in Vegas with Lear, drinking and spinning out their dark side conspiracy narrative. Where John Lear had latched onto the Majestic 12 forgery and embellished it, Cooper did likewise, correcting Lear according to the information he claimed to have seen in the Office of Naval Intelligence.
There were many more saucer crashes and downed craft than what you have realized. There were many more alien bodies recovered, and there were more live aliens recovered than what you are aware of. The live alien that had been taken from the 1949 Roswell crash was called EB. It was short for extraterrestrial biological entity. The idea for MJ-12 was thus born.
Like Lear, he promoted the popular claims about cattle mutilation.
There's records of this classical type cattle mutilation going back a long, long time. And back in the Dark Ages, there's records of human mutilation in the same manner, which may have given rise to the vampire legends. Because back then, nobody was hiding the corpses.
Likening the attacks to those attributed to vampires in the past, he was kind of bumping up backward against the truth of the matter, since both phenomena are perfectly explained by the processes of decomposition and only misconstrued as something paranormal. When John Lear began to promote the claims of another supposed military whistleblower, Bill English, former Special Forces, who claimed to have seen a suppressed report from Project Blue Book, the legendary Report 13, confirming that UFOs were of extraterrestrial origin, Bill Cooper again hopped on the bandwagon, saying he too had seen a version of that report in the Hawaiian filing cabinet.
16 volumes were to come out of Grudge, including the controversial Grudge 13, which I and Bill English saw, read, and revealed to the public. Photographs were taken of E.B., which, among others, I and Bill English were to view years later in Grudge 13.
Either Lear didn't find it suspicious that Cooper never mentioned Report 13 before Bill English came along, or he chose to ignore that little sign of Cooper's dishonesty. After pulling his weight with MUFON, Lear arranged for both of his military whistleblowers to speak at the 1989 symposium. Thus, Bill Cooper made his debut, introducing his peculiar blend of UFO conspiracy theories and secret world government claims, the seeds of the grand unifying conspiracy theory he would later develop. He read his paper in a near monotone, listing dry references to classified documents.
NSC 10-2 established a study panel which met by secret executive memorandum. NSC 5410 Eisenhower had preceded NSC 5412/1 in 1950, a top secret annex to NSC 4, which was NSC 4 Alpha, or 4A, for those of you who are confused by military terms.
And supposed project names.
Project Sigma and a new Project Plato, Project Red Light, a second project codenamed Snowbird.
To outline a massive conspiracy implicating such groups as the Council on Foreign Relations,
the Committee of the Council on Foreign Relations, known
the Bilderberg Group,
as the Bilderbergers,
and the Trilateral Commission. Members of which are typically recruited, he said, from secret societies in Ivy League colleges, like the Skull and Bones Club.
From the Skull and Bones and the Scroll and Key societies of Harvard and Yale.
All of which claims have since become mainstays of popular conspiracy theory. You can tell he believed himself to be the smartest person in the room from the way he periodically stopped and asked if anyone understood what he had just read.
How many of you know what that means? How many of you understand what I just said to you? Not too many.
Like Lear before him, faced with the evidence that the MJ-12 papers were fake.
Those names, which are on the fraudulent document known as Majestic 12, or the Eisenhower briefing document, which is in reality a contingency plan to lead you right through the Rose Garden.
He nevertheless doubled down to insist that what they revealed was real, that Majestic 12 was actually called Majority 12 or Majesty 12, and it was an operation of the New World Order.
To establish a permanent committee, not ad hoc, to be known as Majority 12, MJ 12,
to oversee and conduct all covert activities concerned with the alien question. There were 12 members, including the first 6 from government positions, thus majority 12.
Unlike others on Lear's dark side of ufology, Bill Cooper's claims were explicitly grounded in global politics, all of which he saw as directly tied to the ET cover-up and the secret world government.
Without aliens, you cannot make sense of anything else that's been happening for the 44 years. You put the aliens in the middle of this stuff and you've got all the answers, every one of them.
And when the audience suggested he was full of it,
if you believe it's outrageous, stick around a few years.
I'm not sure how it comes to acquire information in any instance or something. I want to hear what he's got to say.
he claimed he didn't care if they believed, that he was just morally obliged to get the truth out.
This is very disturbing information, and I don't expect anyone to believe it. I don't expect one of you to believe what I'm telling you. And I knew that when I came here. I'm not one of you. I'm not a ufologist. I'm not a researcher. I have an obligation to inform the public, and once that's done, I've done my job. From then on, it's up to you, not me.
Nevertheless, it became apparent that he was there out of more than just moral obligation when he announced that he would afterward be selling the text of his speech.
The text of my speech will be on sale outside. I advise that you purchase a copy of my text, which will be on sale the minute that I finish my last word.
Now for a brief intermission. Every summer, I'm careful to avoid getting burned. My summer plans always include applying sunscreen so I can attend barbecues and protests without worrying about getting scorched. And when I make my plans by making phone calls, I also don't want to get burned by an outrageous wireless bill. That's why I switched to a Mint Mobile plan and saved enough to take a summer vacation. With Mint, I found no difference in speed or coverage, just a big difference in cost. And right now you can switch to a Mint wireless plan like me to avoid sweating those surprise charges and overages. You'll just be chillin' with Mint's offer of 3 months premium service on the nation's largest 5G network for just $15 a month. With high-speed data and unlimited talk and text, it might just be the coolest thing happening this summer. This year, skip breaking a sweat and breaking the bank. Get this new customer offer and your 3-month unlimited wireless plan for just $15 a month at mintmobile.com/blindness. That's mintmobile.com/blindness. Upfront payment of $45 required, equivalent to $15 a month. Limited time new customer offer for first 3 months only. Speeds may slow above 35 gigabytes on unlimited plan. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details. As listeners of Historical Blindness, you're no strangers to the fact that history is a lens through which we can better understand the present. Or as Shakespeare put it, what's past is prologue. History is the indispensable context without which we cannot hope to truly understand current events. You understand that, and so do the creators of the American Scandal podcast. Every season, they immerse listeners in the biggest controversies in U.S. history, helping us understand America's dark side and learn from its troubled past. Its latest season, Ruby Ridge Standoff, delves into an incident that sowed the seeds for the rise of the modern radical right. It transports you to 1992, where in a remote corner of Idaho, federal law enforcement surround a small cabin. They've come for Randy Weaver, a survivalist who took his family to the mountains in anticipation of the apocalypse. A simple weapons charge brought the agents here, but the situation is about to explode into a deadly and tragic standoff that will later become a rallying cry for far-right extremists, fueling distrust and violent anti-government sentiment for decades. Follow American Scandal on the Wondery app or wherever you get your podcasts. You can binge all episodes of American Scandal's Ruby Ridge Standoff early and ad-free right now on Wondery Plus. Now, back to the show. At that very symposium, after Bill Moore revealed his complicity in feeding government disinformation to ufologists, a revelation that in some ways discredited claims John Lear had made and Bill Cooper had confirmed, Cooper reportedly raged at Lear, believing Lear had somehow betrayed him by feeding him disinformation. This just shows that Bill Cooper was lying all along by saying he had seen documents in the Office of Naval Intelligence that confirmed what Lear claimed, since it wouldn't really make sense to blame Lear for such false information if he had really seen it 18 years earlier in classified documents. But if we want to debunk the UFO claims of supposed whistleblower Bill Cooper, there are many far stronger pieces of evidence than this. For example, in one particularly absurd claim, Cooper asserted that the absence of Rh factor in some people's blood type proved that humanity had been genetically engineered by extraterrestrials.
The creation of man, not evolution, the creation of man by an outside influence, not of this earth. Rh negative blood tends to support it. See, the Rh factor means rhesus, means a factor in our blood that this is a direct descendant from the rhesus monkey. If the human bloodline had remained pure during all these hundreds of thousands of years, or however long it was, there would be nobody with the Rh factor missing, in other words, Rh negative blood. There had to have been an outside interbreeding with the human race to produce an Rh negative factor. It's scientific fact, I'm not making this up. It could not have been caused by a mutation. If you have studied genetics at all, mutations do not reproduce themselves.
Actually, he is totally making this up. Some mutations absolutely are reproduced in that they are inherited. And genetic mutation and environmental pressures are the two main generators of diversity in species. And the rhesus blood type he's talking about received its name only because it was first discovered in rhesus monkeys, not because it's some kind of evolutionary marker. Take note of the confidence with which he spewed such malarkey. A further example of claims Cooper made that prove completely baseless on further evaluation involves an early assertion of a NASA cover-up. Like Donald Keyhoe before him, who made disproven claims about lunar bases, Bill Cooper also liked to project images of the moon during his lectures and misinterpret blurry shadows as evidence of structures.
This is a close-up of another one. Next.
He would impress upon his audience that it was, quote, a real photo, end quote.
It's a real photo.
Which is meaningless. Of course, the photo was really a photo, though it certainly didn't reveal what he imagined it revealed. Cooper said the images he showed, taken from a book published by NASA called The Moon as Viewed by Lunar Orbiter, were quickly suppressed after their publication, when the government realized what they revealed.
This is a book that's extremely difficult to find. The Moon is Viewed by Lunar Orbiter, published by the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Well, I knew that they had published these in their own books, but they had yanked the books when they found out what was in them.
In reality, the volume had a limited print run and subsequently was out of print. It was not printed again because a more definitive text, entitled Lunar Orbiter Photographic Atlas of the Moon, was published the following year. And the fact is, because the orbital photographs were transmitted as analog data and had to be assembled as a mosaic, the images back then were extremely low resolution. We would not get the higher resolution images until some computer-savvy volunteer researchers working out of an empty McDonald's since the late 2000s started recovering the data. Today, we have entirely detailed images of the moon, and the original NASA volume Cooper claimed had been suppressed is freely available online, digitized, and hosted by NASA themselves. Like the supposed pyramid and face on Mars, both of which claims Bill Cooper also promoted, all such claims have been disproven with higher resolution imagery. Another simple way of revealing Bill Cooper's general lack of credibility is by simply pointing out that most of the claims he purported to confirm because he had supposedly seen classified documents about them turned out to be verified hoaxes. This goes well beyond the Majestic 12 forgeries. He also promoted the story of a 1948 UFO crash at Aztec, New Mexico.
And there are two crashes that are so important that the government will go to any lengths to prevent you from finding out. And those are two crashes which occurred near the city of Aztec, New Mexico. Why? Because both of those crashed craft contained human body parts.
This story had been exposed back in the 50s as a hoax concocted by two con men claiming to have alien technology for sale. And at the MUFON Symposium, Bill Moore attributed its resurgency among ufologists to government disinformation.
Unfortunately, there was no UFO crash at Aztec, nor was there much truth to any of the other material supplied to this particular researcher, either at that meeting or during later encounters.
So really it was a twice debunked story, which through extension debunks Cooper's claims that he was privy to government secrets, since those secrets he claimed knowledge of were debunked. Unless, as he might have you believe, the secret government had seeded forged documents into naval intelligence filing cabinets just to disinform random office workers. Cooper would go on to talk about Alternative 3, the secret government's plan to establish colonies on the moon and Mars.
Society confirmed the finding of the scientists and made three recommendations called Alternatives 1, 2, and 3. Alternative 3 was to exploit the alien and conventional technology in order for a select few to leave the Earth and establish colonies in outer space. The moon, codenamed Adam, would be the object of primary interest, followed by the planet Mars, codenamed Eve.
Well, this idea was pretty much plagiarized from a 1977 British television documentary called Alternative 3 that purported to reveal just such a conspiracy. The film started out as an investigative report about the so-called brain drain, or the idea that the most highly intelligent or skilled citizens were leaving the country. But they claimed their investigation evolved to look into actual disappearances.
Those people you've just seen have all lost someone close to them. A relative, a colleague, a friend. Lost in mysterious circumstances, sudden and inexplicable disappearance without trace. If you're wondering what this sort of story, important and even tragic though it may be, has to do with science report, well, we have to go back in time some 18 months, when we began work on another film which examined the scientific brain drain from Britain.
That film was never completed because our inquiries led us into some strange and unexpected byways. And they, in their turn, led uniformly to a blank wall.
Over the course of the documentary, it claimed to reveal that missing scientists had actually been recruited for a secret space program that was preparing colonies on the moon and Mars in order to ensure the survival of the elite in the face of global climate disaster. The film ends with supposed footage of a secret landing on Mars, during which astronauts film an alien life form moving beneath the sand.
22nd May, 1962. We're on the planet Mars, and we have life.
We believe that to be an authentic record of the first and secret landing on Mars, May the 22nd, 1962. Clearly, the blanket of total security by which this information has been covered could only have been maintained by the active cooperation of governments at very high level. We believe that that operation is Dr. Carl Gerstein's Alternative 3.
Needless to say, the broadcast of this program alarmed many viewers, much like the Orson Welles' War of the Worlds broadcast. And also much like the Welles broadcast, this too was a work of fiction, a mockumentary. It was intended, its creators explained, as a satire of fringe beliefs and government conspiracy claims. And it was supposed to air on April 1st as an April Fool's joke. But because they were unable to obtain the intended time slot, it was aired on the 20th of June instead. There was no reason to believe the claims of Alternative 3, a clear work of fiction. But that didn't stop Cooper from repeating its claims without any reference to the actual mockumentary. This isn't that surprising, however, as it's clear that the known fictionality of a claim would not stop Bill Cooper from asserting that it was in fact true, that it had only been dramatized as fiction to make you doubt that it could be true. He claimed, for example, that the events of Close Encounters of the Third Kind really happened.
The movie that most of you may have seen, how many of you saw Close Encounters of the Third Kind? That movie was absolutely true. Those events did take place. Not exactly as you saw them, not in the place where you saw them take place. But there was a landing, there was an agreement, there was conversation, there was an exchange of personnel made.
Likewise, when Cooper spoke of the types of alien races in contact with Earth and its secret government, he listed those already claimed by a variety of ufologists: Greys from Orion or Zeta Reticuli, Pleiadians, etc. But he also threw in the benevolent Taros and the sadistic subterranean Daros, a direct reference to the Shaver hoax. Patrons of the show just got a mini-sode all about these claims and the influence of their promoter on UFO mythology generally. But for those who don't support on Patreon, essentially, the Shaver hoax claims were the ramblings of a paranoid schizophrenic that Sci-Fi magazine editor Ray Palmer reworked and published as a stunt to increase readership. So it was yet another work of science fiction Cooper repeated as if it were a secret fact he had seen evidence of in a naval intelligence filing cabinet. In fact, his tendency to run with known falsehoods is what eventually led to his falling out with John Lear and ufology generally. One of Cooper's many claims was having seen the original Krill papers during his time in naval intelligence. The Krill papers was a document that appeared in '88, written by one O.H. Krill, that seemed to support much of the Lear hypothesis, and therefore much of what Cooper claimed as well. Cooper claimed to have insider knowledge that O.H. Krill was actually an alien hostage.
His name and title, and I know it sounds ridiculous, but it's absolutely true. His name and title was His Omnipotent Highness Krill, pronounced Krill, spelled K-R-L-L-L or C-R-L-L-L. In the American tradition of disdain for royal titles, he was secretly called Original Hostage Krill, or O.H. Krill, so that Americans would not have to say, Your Omnipotent Highness.
Well, it turns out, as John Lear had apparently explained to Bill Cooper more than once, John Lear himself had written the Krill papers, just another forged document intended to bolster the UFO mythology he and his Darksiders were crafting. When Lear eventually suggested Cooper stop lying about the Krill papers, since Lear had already admitted to many that he had co-authored the work with one John Grace, Cooper doubled down and began claiming John Lear was lying about writing the papers. After his falling out with Lear, however, came Cooper's falling out with ufology generally. After a couple years of insupportable claims and the promotion of known hoaxes, the ufologists who once gave him the benefit of the doubt began to turn on Cooper. Even one of Lear's original dark side protégés, Don Ecker, became fatigued, writing in a 1990 article in the magazine UFO, quote, "Who are the UFO whistleblowers? They come out of relative obscurity and burst into the center of ufological attention, making incredible claims of alien activity on Earth and the government's deep but covert involvement. Without exception, the whistleblowers of recent times only furnish the most hazy evidence of their claims, if that." End quote. I think it quite apparent that this sentiment could validly be repeated regarding UFO whistleblowers today. So Bill Cooper fell out with Lear and with MUFON. Indeed, he began claiming that they were part of the conspiracy, part of the cover-up. Lear's former CIA connections through Air America meant he was running their disinformation, and MUFON was simply a front organization infiltrated by government operatives who used it to control the UFO narrative.
I know that MUFON is not doing what they claim to do. I know that evidence has disappeared when it's been sent to MUFON. That's what I know about MUFON. I know that if aliens are really here and the government wants to keep it a secret, all the publications dealing with the information and all the organizations investigating this would be infiltrated and controlled by the government to suppress the information. I know that if aliens are not real and the government is perpetrating this hoax, then they're doing it through those organizations and publications and through people like me that innocently was passed documents through my hands and tried to come out and talk about it.
One might imagine that this change in his approach would limit his platform, but Bill Cooper had already begun to evolve. Norio Hayakawa, a UFO enthusiast in California, had heard him speak and arranged and promoted a successful lecture at Hollywood High School in 1989, and from there, his speaking gigs took off. As he traveled and lectured on his conspiracy theories, his claims evolved, moving away from the alien conspiracies and toward much darker claims about the aims of the New World Order. He leaned on widespread conspiracy theories, putting his own spin on them. For example, he did a lot to spread the prevalent HIV as U.S. bioweapon claims I recently refuted in an episode, sharing the text of some legislation that he claimed proved the virus had been engineered.
House Bill 15090 was introduced and debated, and they took testimony in front of Congress in 1968, in which they plainly state in no uncertain terms that they're going to develop a microbe that will attack the autoimmune system.
Actually, the bill was urging research in order to be prepared in the eventuality that a rival nation engineered such a biological warfare agent. And the bill absolutely does not say anything about a microbe that attacks the autoimmune system. It only posits the development of an infective microorganism that, quote, might be refractory to the immunological and therapeutic processes, end quote, which only means it might be hard for our bodies and medicine to deal with. Similarly, he developed his own take on the JFK assassination, that centerpiece of modern conspiracism, asserting that in some grainy footage, it could be seen that William Greer, the Secret Service agent driving his car, turned around and aimed a handgun at President Kennedy.
Here you can see William Greer, who's the driver of the car. You can see him beginning to turn around. Kellerman is leaning down to grab the wheel. You can see Greer's hand here is no longer on the wheel. It is coming up. You can see the end of the gun barrel right here. Next slide.
In fact, rather like an ink blot or a shape in a cloud, if you are trying to see this in the low-resolution film, you can imagine it, even though what you're seeing is really the sun gleaming on the shiny hair of the Secret Service agent in the passenger seat, who also turns his head back to look at the president. Cooper liked to preface his JFK theory by displaying a slide with a quote attributed to Kennedy. Quote, "The high office of the president has been used to foment a plot to destroy America's freedom, and before I leave this office, I must inform the citizens of their plight," end quote. Cooper suggested that Kennedy knew about the alien cover-up, that this was the plot he had mentioned, and that he was killed to silence him. The problem is that this quotation is entirely apocryphal. Kennedy never actually said it. And Cooper's takes on these two conspiracy theories help to demonstrate his evolving claims. He used to assert the AIDS epidemic was part of the alien cover-up, that spreading disease among humanity and controlling the population was part of the alien agenda. But later he would just claim it was part of the New World Order agenda, and aliens were a smokescreen. And not only did he assert that Kennedy had been killed for his knowledge of the aliens, he also claimed William Greer was an alien and had shot Kennedy with alien technology.
It is not an ordinary type pistol.
But when he moved away from his ufology roots, he instead claimed that Greer had used a dart gun with shellfish toxins, and that Kennedy was killed because he was going to reveal the grand overarching conspiracy of the New World Order. So after all, following all the assertions he had made for years about retrieved craft and recovered aliens, claims that we saw trotted out before Congress again this year, Bill Cooper would eventually flip-flop and say all of that was government disinformation. Which, again, maybe he was blindly bumping against the truth here in his flailing for explanations. Next in Cooper's career came his most important legacy, a book, Behold a Pale Horse, which he managed to get published by a small New Age printer that focused on mystical works. I emphasize that he got this book published and not that he wrote it, because though it did indeed include some autobiographical writing in which Cooper tried to establish his background in naval intelligence in order to establish some credibility with readers, much of the volume simply reproduces other documents, or rather forgeries and hoaxes. One was the report from Iron Mountain.
This is the report from Iron Mountain on the possibility and desirability of peace. In other words, if they were to bring about this New World Order, what would this New World Order be like, and how could they maintain peace?
This book, first published in 1967, purported to be the official report of a secret government study group meeting in a bunker. Highlights of the work include the determination that war or some credible threat of equal weight is necessary for the stabilization of society, and the recommendation of possible alternatives to the threat of war, one being the threat of alien contact.
It has been hotly argued that such a menace would offer the last best hope of peace, etc., by uniting mankind against the danger of destruction by creatures from other planets or from outer space. Experiments have been proposed to test the credibility of an out-of-our-world invasion threat.
This, of course, fit well with Cooper's evolving conspiracy narrative. Only the book was exposed as a hoax in 1990, when its true author revealed himself in order to claim copyright on the work, when others, like Cooper, started reprinting it as if it were in the public domain. It turns out Leonard Lewin had written it as a satire, and its publishers, including novelist E.L. Doctorow, sold it as non-fiction as a publicity stunt. Never mind all that, though. Cooper and other conspiracy theorists would continue to insist, even today, that it was real. And going along well with the plans supposedly discussed in the bunker at Iron Mountain was Cooper's reprinting of a pamphlet from 1979 called Concentration Camp Plans for the U.S. Citizens. This pamphlet and Cooper's amplification of its claims are what is responsible for the many conspiracy theories about the Federal Emergency Management Agency and supposed plans for FEMA camps.
FEMA will be what takes over the government of this country when they declare a national emergency and suspend the Constitution and join the New World Order. Next slide.
Going back to the original pamphlet and Cooper's dissemination of it, claims about FEMA camps degenerate into lists of supposed sites, abandoned prisons, or shuttered factories, named as supposed locations without any actual evidence. And this would continue with the advent of social media. Just like Cooper's images of the moon, people post pictures of any appropriate-looking installation or fortified structure, often photoshopped, and say, "Hey, look, a real picture." Another big chunk of the book was a document entitled Silent Weapons for Quiet Wars, which was supposedly a, quote, introductory programming manual, end quote, for those being onboarded into the secret government conspiracy. It outlined a psyop of massive proportions being conducted on all the general populace of the world. It was World War III, the document claimed. But instead of being waged on an opposing army, it was being waged on civilians. And instead of firing bullets, combatants had essentially weaponized misinformation and economic conditions. In some ways, its observations were valid, I think. But the notion that all of this, basically the conditions of the modern world in the information age, was some ongoing operation of an intelligence group was a farce. Most believed Cooper had written it himself, but actually it had been found on a copy machine and circulated among conspiracist newspapers before it got into Cooper's hands. In 2003, it was claimed by one Hartford Van Dyke, who was serving an 8-year sentence for counterfeiting, as he had sent $600,000 phony dollars to the IRS with a message calling it, quote, fake money to satisfy fake debts, end quote. He didn't claim the work was genuine. It was his quote-unquote manifesto, a work that he himself admitted was more an expression of his quote-unquote sociopathy than his paranoia. But Cooper printed this found document as if it were absolutely genuine proof of what they were doing to us. And finally, perhaps the most egregious reproduction of a known fake in his book, Cooper reprinted the Protocols of the Elders of Zion in its entirety. If you don't know what that is, check out my older episode, The Terrible Within the Small, or The Fabrication of the Learned Elders of Zion and the Forgery of Their Protocols. Essentially, it was a plagiarized forgery that invented the notion of a global Jewish conspiracy. In perhaps the weakest caveat possible, Cooper told his readers that though it maybe wasn't a Jewish conspiracy the protocols revealed, the conspiracy was still very real, telling them just to replace the word Jew with the word Illuminati. Now for a brief intermission.
It's back to school season and Clorox is donating 2 million disinfecting wipes to classrooms across America. Because back to school means things can get a little bit messy. Just ask second grade teacher Mr. Torres.
Put me and just one Clorox wipe on a team? We can take on crayon smudges, sticky fingerprints on every surface, sneezes on the door handle, juice box explosion by the sink, snack crumbs, and don't even get me started on the bathroom passes.
Clorox disinfecting wipes. Teacher's #1 wipe.
Think about it. Bathroom passes.
Clean feels good. Based on unit sales data.
Your burger is served, and this is our finest Pepsi Zero Sugar. Its sweet profile perfectly balances the savory notes of your burger.
That is one perfect combination. Burgers deserve Pepsi.
Now, back to the show. Those who follow my efforts on historical blindness may be familiar with my banner episodes on Illuminati conspiracy claims, The Illuminati Illuminated, which examine their origins and demonstrate quite clearly the lack of merit and falsehood of that grand unifying conspiracy theory. In crafting his own grand unifying conspiracy theory, Bill Cooper would include the Illuminati as the architects of the New World Order, but he claimed to trace the conspiracy much further back, to the beginnings of human history. He fleshed out his conspiracist worldview during the next chapter of his career, hosting a program with massive reach on the worldwide country radio shortwave broadcaster out of Tennessee, home of a variety of religious programs, conspiracy theorists, and right-wing extremists. Every episode of the show, The Hour of the Time, signaled his apocalyptic worldview with the sound of klaxons and jackbooted marching. It was on this program that Cooper, in a series he called Mystery Babylon, traced the New World Order conspirators from modern organizations like the Council on Foreign Relations and the Bilderbergers Group back to the Bavarian Illuminati, and before them to the Freemasons and, you guessed it, the Knights Templar. But like the plot of the Assassin's Creed video games, he claimed that these groups were just evolutions of an ancient secret society that had evolved through the millennia, taking different names along the way. Back through the Romans to the Greeks to the ancient Egyptians, he traced them to so-called mystery schools, and specifically to a group called the Brotherhood of the Serpent. As with most of Cooper's claims, he was repackaging theories he'd read elsewhere, as if they were truths he had discovered through deep research. In reality, he seems to have adopted much of this from a 1989 book called The Gods of Eden, in which author William Bramley hypothesized that this ancient secret society was a group of extraterrestrials bent on controlling all subsequent human history. While Cooper had moved away from the ET angle, he still used everything he could from such claims, repurposing them to suit his views, which took on more and more religious, millenarian qualities. There had always been an element of this in his claims, going all the way back to his MUFON debut, when he claimed the secret government had uncovered a secret prophecy in the Vatican, predicting certain end-times occurrences in the 90s.
This prophecy stated that if man did not turn from evil and place himself at the feet of Christ, the planet would self-destruct and the events described in the book of Revelations would indeed come to pass. It stated that a child would be born who would unite the world with a plan for world peace and a false religion beginning in 1992. By 1995, the people would discern that he was evil and was indeed the Antichrist. World War III would begin in the Middle East in 1995 with an invasion of Israel by a united Arab nation using conventional weapons, which would culminate in a nuclear holocaust in the year 1999. Between 1999 and 2003, most of the life on this planet would suffer horribly and die as a result. The return of Christ would occur in the year 2011. Is this true? I don't know.
Of course this wasn't true, since none of the supposed foretold end times events actually occurred in the 90s. But it became a theme in his assertions. The shadowy powers that shaped world events were following the timeline of Revelation, working to make its prophecies a reality.
It's like I said a while ago, they're following the book of Revelations like a script to neutralize opposition against them. If you believe that it has been prophesized and it's ordained by God, you won't oppose them. I'm a Christian, and I'm not buying it. I'm going to oppose them.
Surely the mark of the beast would next be introduced, or perhaps it already had. Cooper told his listeners that barcodes may actually be the mark of the Antichrist.
That's right. It's an invisible tattoo, but it can be scanned. I'd like to say also that the reason I left California, took my family and left, I went to vote in the last election, and I saw on the voter registration form next to my name the Universal Product Code. I packed up my family and I left California. I now know, and I just left California, I was just speaking in Pasadena, I have seen them, it's true. The driver's license in California now have the Universal Product Code on the driver's license.
As I said before, we can discern the evolution of Cooper's claims by looking at his changing views on the Kennedy assassination. After a while, when it was no longer aliens but rather New World Order assassins, Cooper began to assert that it was actually a Luciferian plot, claiming Dealey Plaza was an occult place of power, making Kennedy a human sacrifice. And he told his listeners that if you took the year 1307, when the Knights Templar were suppressed, and you subtracted it from the year 1963, when JFK was assassinated, voila, you get the number of the beast, 666. Actually, you get the number 656, but he was close, and his listeners probably didn't run the numbers themselves. His very presence on shortwave radio meant he was garnering listeners in survivalist, white separatist, Christian identity, and militia communities. Other hosts on his network had already cultivated dedicated audiences among such groups, like the Silent Brotherhood in the Pacific Northwest, and the Covenant, the Sword, and the Arm of the Lord in the Ozarks, groups with ideologies that led them to commit armed robbery and murder. To his credit, Cooper said on air that the Christian identity movement was, quote, the biggest bunch of hogwash I ever heard in my entire life, end quote, asserting specifically that, quote, these people are racist, completely mental, end quote, that they, quote, might call themselves patriots, but they are not. They are liars lying to us, end quote. Despite the fact that he had reprinted the anti-Semitic protocols in his book, he resisted outright anti-Semitism, and when he was labeled an anti-Semite by the Anti-Defamation League and the Southern Poverty Law Center, he called it a quote-unquote smear campaign. In his lashing out at Jews who called him an anti-Semite, however, he began to express more and more anti-Semitic views, including Holocaust denial. And while some of his statements drove away the quote-unquote patriot militia sort, plenty of them found much to admire in his broadcasts, especially after Waco. During the siege of the Branch Davidian compound in 1993, Cooper did much to craft the white separatist American militiaman view of the event, drawing valid connections between that siege and the one at Ruby Ridge, and drawing attention to the very real mismanagement of the entire debacle by the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, and afterward the FBI. But also mixing in absolute falsehoods, like his claim that the government gave the Branch Davidians poison milk, or his misrepresentation of David Koresh as a monogamous family man rather than a polygamist and serial rapist of underage girls. Cooper would go on to cover the Oklahoma City bombing in much the same fashion, claiming that Timothy McVeigh was a patsy, that he was, quote, the Lee Harvey Oswald of the American Reichstag, end quote. Eventually it came out, though, that Timothy McVeigh and his several accomplices were regular listeners of Cooper's. In federal court, several of them testified that Cooper's program had inspired them to take their anti-government action. And finally, it was revealed that Timothy McVeigh had actually come to visit him before the bombing, and according to Cooper, had said they intended to take some action that they believed would make a difference, and cryptically told him to, quote, watch Oklahoma City, end quote. The fact that Cooper knew this while he broadcasted assertions of McVeigh's innocence and claims that the bombing was a false flag operation, serves as perhaps the ultimate piece of evidence discrediting him. Starting out on internet bulletin boards, Bill Cooper, over the course of only about 10 years, would blaze a trail through fringe belief at which one cannot help but marvel. His influence cannot be exaggerated. He is known for having popularized many conspiracy claims that have proven to have lasting power. And he even popularized a lot of the phrases that people mock when talking about conspiracy theorists, and that conspiracy speculators continue to unironically use today. For example, it seems he coined the term sheeple.
We are truly now at this moment a nation of sheep. And ladies and gentlemen, I assure you that sheep are always led to the slaughter.
The only thing that can stop it is by waking up vast amounts of sleeping people. Sheeple is what they are. They are following the Judas goat right into the shearing pins, and from there they will go to the slaughter, and they will not know that anything is wrong until they smell the blood of the sheeple in front of them. And I know that when you're listening and I talk about the sheeple, the stupid sheeple, it doesn't make you angry. You know why? Because you know you're not stupid sheeple, don't you? The person that gets angry has verified that I was right. Because he wouldn't get angry if he didn't know in his heart that he's a stupid sheeple.
And he was always telling his audience to do their own research.
Don't even believe me. Start searching, start examining, question, look, go to your library, dig, find the answers. And research everything that I'm telling you, and your own research will tell you that I am telling you the truth, and I don't have to do that. Now, if you think I'm crazy, get off your butt and start digging, because you will find out that it's absolutely true. And those of you who doubt that this is taking place should leave your job, should leave your home, should do whatever you have to do, and go look for yourself, because it's important that you know it and that you believe it.
He made broad assertions about the mainstream media, claiming we do not have a free press.
And I'm going to tell you right now, unless we can be successful in creating a real free press where the American people get different viewpoints other than those expressed in the establishment-controlled media, there's going to be a civil war in this country, and it's going to come soon.
But in the same breath, he's urging people to publish their own content.
Anybody can publish a newsletter or a newspaper. Anybody. It is not expensive. It is not difficult. And everyone in this room should be doing it all across this country. And everybody that you come in contact with, you should encourage them to do it. And we should flood this nation with information.
Apparently unbothered by the cognitive dissonance of it all, demonstrating how free Americans really are to express themselves and publish false claims, just as Cooper himself had done. Bill Cooper is sometimes credited as having accurately predicted certain occurrences or historical developments. For example, he is said to have predicted that we were moving toward a cashless society. In reality, what he predicted is far more extreme than what we see today with electronic transactions and e-banking.
It's going to be the new world. It's going to be your accountant. It's not going to be any more cash. There will not be any more swap meets. There won't be any selling your mattress to your neighbor when you buy a new one. Everything will be registered. They're already starting it in Oklahoma and 21 other states. You will register all your property. If they come to your home and something's missing, you're a criminal. There will be no black market. You will not be able to work. You will not be able to buy. You will not be able to sell. You will not be able to get medical care. You will not be able to do anything except with your number through the computer. This is the truth, folks. I'm not making this up.
Basically, he said things like yard sales would be prohibited by law, and that failing to record and report each minor transaction would be grounds for imprisonment. Now, I ask you, does that sound accurate in today's world, when we might pitch in on a restaurant tab with cash or by sending a Venmo that will not be reported to the IRS, which would have no interest in such transactions. People also credit Cooper with predicting 9/11.
And whatever is going to happen that they're going to blame on Osama bin Laden, don't you even believe it. Another social illusion, social engineering project to change the minds and the attitudes and the beliefs of the people of the world, and especially the United States, to bring about one world socialist totalitarian government. When in hell are all you people going to wake up?
In reality, the FBI had placed Osama bin Laden on their most wanted list since 1999. Cooper was responding to a recent report aired on CNN in which a journalist had been able to speak with bin Laden. Cooper couldn't believe that a journalist might penetrate a hideout that the U.S. government had been unable to find. So it must have been propaganda allowed by the government, he claimed.
Are you kidding me? I mean, is this some kind of incredible joke that people are so stupid they fall for this? Do you know how much money the CIA and the National Security Agency and the FBI has at its disposal each year? Do you know how many agents they have that they can devote to this? Do you realize the technology that they have to be able to eavesdrop on every single conversation in the world?
In reality, though, the U.S. government was unable to apprehend bin Laden because he was being harbored by the Taliban government. And some American CNN reporter had not managed to penetrate their defenses to interview them. It was the bureau chief of the Middle East Broadcasting Company in Pakistan, and he had been invited to Kandahar to interview bin Laden because bin Laden wanted to preemptively take credit for the 9/11 attacks. During the interview, he dropped hints about the forthcoming attacks. So really, all Bill Cooper anticipated with his remarks were the unsupported talking points of 9/11 truthers who would spring up after his death. In fact, the most influential truther work, the documentary Loose Change, has been accused of plagiarizing Bill Cooper. One last prediction it is claimed Bill Cooper made was of his own murder by the government. A couple months after his broadcasts about 9/11, Bill Cooper died in a shootout with authorities on his property. Of course, this made him a martyr in the minds of his devotees, who believed the government had finally decided to silence him after his 9/11 broadcasts. In truth, there had been a warrant for his arrest for years because of tax evasion. Local sheriffs had put off arresting him for a long time because they just knew Bill Cooper wouldn't go easily. Finally, after Cooper's neighbors had made complaints of being harassed by him and of Cooper pulling a gun on them, the sheriff's office felt they had to finally arrest him. All precautions were taken to arrest him without violence. They drew him out of his house by pretending to be partiers playing loud music on the road. Cooper came out, got in his vehicle, and drove down the hill to where the undercover officers were blasting their boombox, yelling at them to leave or he'd call the police. When he started driving back up to his house, the sheriffs blocked the road with another vehicle and declared that he was under arrest. But as expected, Cooper didn't go gentle. He gunned it, drove directly at a deputy, made it all the way back up to his driveway before crashing his vehicle. Then he came out shooting as he made for his front door. In fact, he shot Deputy Rob Marinez in the head. Skull fragments entered the deputy's brain, and he would afterward be paralyzed. As he fired at one deputy, another fired at him, killing him. In one way, certainly, he had made a valid prediction when, the year before, he'd told a friend, Doyle Shamley, that he had, quote, decided what he was going to do now, end quote, saying that he, quote, can always be a martyr, End quote. This, however, seems to have been more of a self-fulfilling prophecy. Bill Cooper's legacy, the mark he left on the world today, remains far broader than one might imagine. He made his mark on ufology, and he made his mark on conspiracist culture generally. And he remains a legend among the anti-government militiamen and domestic terrorists who so loved Cooper that when he was alive, they sought him out in person to ask advice before committing their crimes. Though it's true some have since rejected him for not being racist enough. More surprisingly, though, his book, Behold a Pale Horse, gained widespread popularity in the black community as well, thanks in large part to its promotion by conspiracy-minded members of the Nation of Islam in New York. The book was also widely read in federal penitentiaries, and it would become, according to one commonly repeated statistic, the most stolen book in the country. As Cooper's book gained popularity in certain parts of the black community, it exerted a huge influence on American rap music, with such rappers as Public Enemy, Tupac Shakur, Nas, Ghostface Killah, Big Daddy Kane, Rakim, Mobb Deep, and Busta Rhymes all considering themselves devotees of the book and making numerous references to Cooper's ideas or even to Cooper himself. As an example, consider this excerpt of Society is Brainwashed by Ill Bill.
November 5th, 2001, less than 2 months after 9/11 occurred. The infamous William Cooper was murdered, ex-naval intelligence officer. But now author of Behold the Pale Horse, he paid the cost. I can't say that I agree with everything that he wrote, but I admire him for speaking his mind though. Never holding his tongue for nobody, our society is brainwashed. Guns in each other's faces for the same lies. Same everything and same nothing.
As mentioned already, Cooper was the origin of 9/11 truther claims, but he was wildly influential on other conspiracists as well, one of whom would go on to succeed him in a lot of ways. Alex Jones, then in his 20s, was an up-and-coming young shortwave broadcaster who got his start on the same network as Bill Cooper. Jones had come up listening to the Hour of the Time, and in a lot of ways he modeled himself on Cooper. Certainly the claims that Jones would make throughout his career about false flag operations were just the same old claims Cooper used to make, recycled for the next tragedy. Alex Jones may best be known for his claims that school shootings were actually orchestrated by the government, and that itself is a claim that Bill Cooper had made in the past. Actually, by all reports, Bill Cooper greatly disliked Alex Jones, thinking him a copycat rival who was stealing his whole shtick.
Alex Jones is a miserable, rotten little stinking, cowardly, bold-faced liar.
From Alex Jones to QAnon, which I mentioned before makes much ado about their invisible informant/leader holding a Q clearance, we continue to see many of the conspiracy delusions of Bill Cooper touted among right-wing extremists and even by current members of Congress. Perhaps most specifically, the idea that the entrenched powers in our government, aka the deep state, are actually a sinister Luciferian cult, can certainly be traced back to Bill Cooper. So in a way, Cooper can be credited or blamed for having cultivated the paranoiac milieu that has made the MAGA cult possible. Though certainly Bill Cooper would chafe at calling it a cult. He didn't like the Branch Davidians being called a cult, and once when he was called a quote-unquote cult figure, he urged that the word not be used. But if we think about it further, the word is absolutely apt. Rather than in the sense of an unorthodox religion or deviant set of beliefs, it is in the sense of the great devotion to that set of fringe beliefs, or to a figure who promulgates them. Just as the Branch Davidians were a cult in the sense of an unorthodox religious sect, a cult of personality was also present in the adherents' devotion to Koresh. And certainly there is a cult of personality in MAGA, just as there was and is a cult of personality among the adherents of Bill Cooper. Likewise, there is an argument to be made that John Lear and the adherents of his dark side UFO mythology are a kind of cult, a relatively small group of people promoting and spreading a dubious set of fringe beliefs to which they are devoted despite all logical disproof. And as we'll see in the final installment of this series on UFO whistleblowers, after Bill Cooper, the cult of John Lear would produce another figure, far more influential on ufology than Bill Cooper, who, though divisive, would inspire a true cult of personality. This figure, Bob Lazar, and his claims about Area 51 will be shown to have direct connection to the claims recently made under oath to Congress by David Grush. Thanks for listening to Historical Blindness. Check out the blog post for this episode, which should go up on historicalblindness.com sometime before the next episode for a transcript, related imagery, and citations for further reading. I especially recommend the Bill Cooper biography, Pale Horse Rider, by Mark Jacobson, which was an indispensable source for this episode. As always, thanks go out to my partner patrons, Diane Lane, Joe Escott, Sean Munger, Devlin Hoff, Michael Markham, Mitchell Shuttler, Jessica Reeves, Fred from Colorado, Robin Naggett, Rebecca, Don Mundus, Eunice Allen Bradley, Juliet O'Connor, Jonathan Williams, Joshua Luddington, Logan Houlihan, Lily Powers, Lonnie Coffer, Ralph Fenn, Ama, Lee Holland, Kevin Osborne, Ed Shockley, Benny Slater, and Rachel Hornbrook. Maybe I should start scheduling skeptic lectures and traveling to hold forth in some veterans hall about how conspiracy theories are false. Would you patrons attend something like that? Or do you think I'd get myself killed out there? This podcast is part of the Airwave Media Podcast Network. Visit airwavemedia.com to listen and subscribe to their other fine shows, like The Constant and The Conspirators. Some music on this episode was licensed through a Blue Dot Sessions blanket license at the time of the episode's publication. Other music on this episode is copyright Alex Kish. Visit alexkishmusic.com and contact him to get compositions for your own projects. Additional music is by Kai Engel and by Kevin MacLeod, licensed under a Creative Commons Attribution license. Check out the show notes for a list of the tracks used. You can support the show by pledging on Patreon or by making a one-time donation on PayPal. Find those links in the show notes, or find me on Venmo at Historical Blindness. Until next time, remember, we can all learn a thing or two from the television program X-Files, which actually cribbed ideas liberally from Bill Cooper and John Lear's dark side dogma. What it teaches us is that it is perfectly natural to, like Agent Mulder, want to believe, though we must, like Scully, remain skeptical.
This episode is brought to you by Bluehost. You might not be a tech genius, but you want the website for your business to crush it. Thankfully, Bluehost makes it easy. Customized, optimized, and monetized. Everything exactly how you want with AI. Your site can be up within minutes, and the search engine tools even help you get more site visitors. Whatever your passion project is, set it up with Bluehost. With their 30-day money-back guarantee, what have you got to lose? Head to Bluehost.com to start now.
Spend less time staying in the know about all things gaming and more time actually watching and playing what you want with the IGN Daily Update podcast. All you need is a few minutes to hear the latest from IGN on the world of video games, movies, and television with news, previews, and reviews. So listen and subscribe to the IGN Daily Update wherever you get your podcasts. That's the IGN Daily Update wherever you get your podcasts.